Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is Harry Brelsford with SMB Nation coming to you live from downtown Seattle, Washington. This is part 3 of our webinar series on Windows 10. So I'm pretty excited about today. We have used the month of November and November to Remember to explore many of the topics on Windows 10. Today, we'll get into it in a moment, but today we have a conversation about its interaction with Office 365, but more importantly, we answer your questions that have built up and questions you'll ask today using the chat feature. So just a reminder to use the chat feature for your webinar questions. A little bit of housekeeping. In the U.S. in particular, next week is a holiday week, so there is no Thursday webinar. We'll be in touch shortly about the next webinar that's coming up in our ongoing series of weekly webinars. But next Thursday is Thanksgiving, so there is no webinar on Thursday next week. We have a lot, we have a lot of activity coming up towards the end of the year. I want to give a shout out to some of our properties just to make sure you're bookmarking these and visiting them. So you of course know about smbnation.com, where we handpick news and write news that we think is of interest to you in the community. We have O365nation.com. That's O365nation.com for the Office 365 conversation. And then some of you will be interested in knowing we have Telefonation. So the two words, Telephone Nation, drop the middle E. Telefonation. That's available online with unified communications, conversations, as well as VoIP. And boy howdy, that thing, I think next year that'll be 10 years old. I think Telefonation will be 10 years old next year, so that is amazing, going back to the early VoIP days. With that said, that's all the housekeeping I really have today. Enjoy the webinar. We have Grant on board. Grant, some people are new to part 3 of the webinar, so if you could introduce yourself, sir, and then I'll give you the talking stick.
Sound great. Thanks, Harry. Welcome, everybody, to this third in a 3-part series that we've been doing on Windows 10 and now incorporating Office 365 into that conversation. Part of this, as Harry mentioned, we'll spend time talking about Windows 10 and Office 365, and then we'll also pick up answers to some of the questions that came up during Part 1 and Part 2. Those are available on SMB Nation's website, so if you missed those, you can go back and review them. As Harry said, my name's Grant Thompson. I'm a solutions architect and one of the founding partners of MG Technology Group, based out in the Seattle area. We're a cloud solutions provider. We run Microsoft Azure and other services in data centers in Seattle and Portland. And my contact information's up here. I'll also have it on the last slide. So if you need technical advice or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. I work a lot with IT professionals, as most of our services are sold through IT professional companies. I've been working with Office 365 since its predecessor, Microsoft Business Productivity Online Suite, or BPOS as it was formerly known, back in 2007. A wide range of expertise from virtualization and high availability, Azure, the Dynamics ERP solutions. So I'm happy to field questions and things that you might have offline. You can connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I try to get to those questions as best I can. So with that said, let's dive into today's webinar and talk a little bit about Office 365. First of all, just to set the foundation, what is Office 365? A lot of you may have heard about it. Some of you may be using it, hopefully, but it's important that all of us start from the same base as far as understanding what it is. Office 365 is a service that's run by Microsoft, hosted in Microsoft data centers around the world. So they manage and maintain all of the infrastructure, all of the software that's required to provide the services to customers. Moves IT more to a utility model like we expect from the power company or the telephone company. And it incorporates several different services depending on the SKU or the plan that you buy from Office 365. But generally speaking, it includes Exchange, which of course is the standard, the gold standard for corporate email and general collaboration, shared calendars, and those sorts of things. Skype for Business, one of my favorite tools that's built into Office 365, which is online conferencing, instant messaging, presence, which I'll mention a little bit on the next slide, audio and video conferencing in HD, screen sharing, as well as presentations. So we could do this presentation over Skype for Business, not only internally with your business users or organization users, but also you could do this externally with people who don't have an Office 365 subscription, vendors, customers, or prospects. SharePoint, this is another one of my favorite Microsoft products, which is online file sharing, collaboration. Intranet is the term that we used to use, a website that's specific to your organization. It also includes workflow for business process automation and file synchronization so that you can have your files on multiple devices, have them all stay in sync, but have them stored centrally in the cloud. And then OneDrive for Business. It's interesting, OneDrive for Business is actually built on top of the same technology that SharePoint's built on, but it's for personal user storage. Think of it as your My Documents in the cloud. And Office 365 includes a terabyte of storage per user. Those are also shareable, so if you needed to store a document that's not necessarily company-specific, but is user-specific, you'd be able to make that accessible to others as well through OneDrive for Business. And then, of course, we have mobile. Mobile's huge. I work mobily a lot, so not only tablets and laptops, but phones as well through the Office web apps and the Office mobile applications. The read-only version of the Office applications is free to people on Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. If you have an Office 365 subscription, it will entitle you to the read and write. In other words, you can edit content or create content on a lot of those mobile devices as well. And Office Web Apps is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote in a browser, so you don't have to have the application loaded on the device you're working on, or you don't have to launch it, which is often what happens with me. Even though I have Office on my PC, a lot of times I will be accessing these things online through a browser, and I can put in edit mode or read mode right in the browser window without switching applications. And then, of course, the Office suite, which is what we all think of when we talk about Microsoft Office, and that is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, those applications that we're used to having installed on your PC. Many of the Office 365 plans include the right to download and install those applications onto your device. Most of the plans include installing that on up to 5 devices per user. So that's a change from the old way where we would buy a copy of Office, it loaded on a device, and whoever used that device had the right to use Office. Now we've moved from that device model to a user model where you, as an Office 365 user, have the right to run Office on up to 5 PCs or Macs and access those, but it's based on your user. So if you have a second user using the same PC, they also need an Office 365 user subscription for them to use Office on that same device. And then it also spreads that. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Grant, I got an interesting story to tell you that yesterday I was working with a large data file, 3.5 million IP addresses that are part of a digital marketing campaign. And I went to Microsoft Excel. Now, full disclosure, I'm not on Excel 2016, so that might be the issue right there. But I opened up the Excel file, and it could only load 1,048,000 rows. and there I learned something, sir. So I'm going to have to think about SQL Server or some kind of database to process that information. And then that also brought up the further thought about what's not in Office 365. And unless I'm wrong, you do not have direct access access to SQL Server in Office 365. SQL Server is still a SKU unto itself. Is that correct, sir, that I can't just spin up a SQL instance?
Sure. No, that's true. And then you'd want to look at Microsoft Azure, either Microsoft hosted or partner hosted, where you could spin up a database as a service or SQL as a service, which is becoming more popular for doing things like that. Incidentally, if you go back a couple versions of Excel, the limit used to be 65,000 rows. And they changed that, I think, in 2007. They added the million rows back there. So it's gotten better, but still, yeah, it's not made for that. Definitely look at your database server for those things.
Not made for big data. Okay, sorry to take so much time. Let's move along.
So why would people want to subscribe to Office 365? First of all, you get current versions. So for those of you who are subscribed to Office 365, today you have access to Office 2016, which was recently released. If you choose to install that, you can install it now, and eventually that will become the new default. And so a new user who signs up will automatically get Office 2016. They have allowed a transition period between 2013 and 2016, so you aren't forced to adopt the latest version immediately. So you're not on the leading edge of that. But you have the right to, if you want to, you can go click the button and say, give me Office 2016 now, and it will give it to you now. I'm going to interject a few of the questions that came up in the previous webinar, so I'll throw one of those questions. Someone noticed that I'm using Office 2013, and they asked why I'm not using Office 2016 since it's been released. And the reason for that is that our organization manages our rollout of upgrades, even though we use Office 365 for our Office applications. We roll those out in a planned and scheduled manner, so our users don't have the ability to just go and get the latest version. Make sure that we go through testing and compatibility and all those things that you would in an enterprise. So I'm still on 2013. We're going to be releasing 2016 to our users probably in December. So you have eligibility to the current version. You don't have to own servers, no more owning Exchange server or small business server or SharePoint servers or any of that. You don't have to maintain them. You don't have to fix them when they break. All of that hardware, all of those resources become the responsibility of the service provider. You get 24/7 technical support included in the service for Microsoft hosted Office 365 that you buy direct through Microsoft. They do 24/7 support for critical incidents under most of the plans. It does vary a little bit by plan. If you go with a partner like our company, there's lots of others out there that sell Office 365 as what Microsoft calls a cloud solutions provider, then they have different support policies because they're directly providing the tech support. So, for example, we provide 24/7 tech support. Doesn't matter if it's deemed a critical issue or not. Compliance. Office 365 provides pretty much all of the tools that one needs to maintain compliance with regulatory compliance issues like HIPAA, Sarbox. So you can get mail encryption. Some of these things are add-ons. Microsoft data centers are all certified for compliance, and they will help you meet the requirements, like signing a BAA if you're subject to HIPAA. Those types of things can all be put in place very easily, so you don't have to worry about getting the tech to do those things. It's all available to you, either built in or as an add-on to your service. You can get to your files from anywhere. That's been a big win for people, being able to work from anywhere and have access to your files versus having to have a corporate VPN, for example, or some other technology that allows you to remote into your work desktop. You can get to it from any device, anywhere you happen to be, as long as you have internet access, and even sometimes when you don't, because you can synchronize a lot of your files so that they're available offline. Skype for Business, I mentioned, is one of my favorite things that's included in Office 365, and that has things like conferencing, presence, which will show a little indicator that will show you what your status is and show others what their status is, if they're busy, if they're in a meeting, if they're marked do not disturb, if they're just away from their PC or their mobile device. It works across devices, so you can instant message from your mobile phone. It has all of those features in it, as well as internal and external meeting capabilities. And it's secure, so your instant messaging is secure. It's saved in Outlook, so your history is searchable. You don't lose the knowledge and information that's in the instant messaging. Just a fantastic tool. And real-time collaborative editing, this is getting even better with Office 2016. The ability to work on a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or a OneNote document simultaneously with multiple editors. For example, if you're in a remote meeting where you have maybe 3 or 4 people on a call and you're working on a budget, you can all have the spreadsheet open. You can all be editing the spreadsheet and making changes together using Skype for Business as your communications tool, and using Office 365 as the platform that enables that real-time collaborative editing. So you can actually see who's working on things and see their changes in near real time as they make them, even if you're across the world. As I've mentioned, in many of these things, it works across devices. So it doesn't matter if you have an iPhone or an iPad or an Android or a Windows phone or a Windows PC or a Mac, their services work across those things. So huge benefit in terms of making all the core IT services available to you no matter where you are and no matter what device you're on. So the real subject of this is Windows 10 and Office 365 and how they work together. So Windows 10 and Office 365 are quote-unquote better together. A little bit of cheese in there. Office 2016 and Windows 10 is by far the most complete solution for doing, meaning it is the most productive pairing that you can have with Office 365 in terms of your services, Windows 10 bringing the latest into the operating system, and of course through Office 365 having the latest version of Office, which provides an amazing amount of features that will make you and your employees or users in your organization more productive. Now, one of the features that we've talked about before in Windows 10 is Windows Hello. If your device supports retinal scanning or fingerprinting, then you can turn on Windows Hello. But just signing into Windows through Windows Hello or through your password or PIN can automatically sign you in both to Windows and all your Office 365 services seamlessly. So you don't have to have a separate login. You don't have to key in an extra set of credentials every time you want to get on your email or access SharePoint. It's all built in and integrated so that you sign in once, what we call single sign-on, and then you have access to all the tools and data that you need. Cortana, which is Microsoft's business assistant that first appeared on Windows Phone and is now built into Windows 10 on the desktop and tablet, integrates with Office 365. So it's more than a personal assistant. Now it becomes a business assistant. We also have tools like Sway, which I'll show you a little bit about. It's a way to create beautiful stories, different than a PowerPoint presentation like this one. I'm not an expert in Sway, so the example that I'm going to show you was something that was built by someone from Microsoft who is more familiar with it. But it's a great way to share content either through an organization or personally, as the example I'll show you is about someone climbing a mountain. But very easy to produce fantastic looking content, and it works across devices again, so you can create one piece of content and then users can view that on different devices, be it a tablet or a mobile phone, and it will adapt to the device that they're on and show it to them in an optimal way without you as the content creator having to do that work.
Hey, Grant, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear.
Okay, great. What I wanted to also interject is just yesterday with a client I was working with about the power of the device that runs, in this case, Windows 10 and also Office 365. And I recommended from one of the Microsoft OEMs, I recommended an executive computer, probably about $2,000 when it's all said and done, 16 gig of RAM and so on. This individual had bought one of the consumer grade laptops and was frustrated with the not responding error and some other errors some of us are, familiar with. And I said, dude, I mean, really, that your compensation level, I mean, seriously, stop it. We gotta get you a good machine. And I just want to make that point because it's ridiculous to have all this power and then buy a sub $500 laptop, and you're selling against yourself at that point, Grant. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I always advise people buy the best computer, the most powerful computer that you can afford when you're going to shop. So if you're on a tight budget, buying a sub $500 computer may be your only choice. And as we've mentioned before, Windows 10 will run on anything that meets the Windows 7 hardware requirements. So they haven't changed through Windows 8 and to Windows 10. But you're certainly going to get better performance out of a higher powered machine. I use a Surface Pro 3, which I think has 8 gigs of RAM in it. It's got an SSD drive in it, so it's nice and snappy and speedy. I don't have any problem with it. I work with it. I mean, it's my primary computer no matter where I am. I have a docking station at my desk, and so that's what I use at my desk or on the go. And it's fantastic. My wife uses a small Dell with 4 gigs of RAM that's a couple years old and shipped with Windows 7, and it runs Windows 10 great. In fact, she was really frustrated with her computer, wanted a new one, and she had been on Windows 8, not 8.1. And I said, well, let me put Windows 10 on it, and if you still hate it, then we'll go buy a new computer. Put Windows 10 on it. She loves it. It's fast again, and she really likes all the new features and things in it. And that's from a consumer user. She's not a business user. So the other thing we've talked about before is Continuum. Speaking of hardware, Continuum is the transition between working with a device that converts like a Surface, where it can be a tablet or it can be a more of a laptop, or things like the Surface Book. And Continuum switches. Windows 10 knows when you switch from traditional computing mode with a keyboard to tablet mode. For example, on my Surface, if I take the keyboard off, or if I fold it backwards, it will recognize that. And then it pops up a little prompt that says, do you want to switch to tablet mode? And then you have an option to have it not ask you next time, so it can seamlessly switch without you having to do anything. And the Office applications now are optimized that way as well. So if you switch from working at a laptop to working at a tablet, you can have your Office applications automatically go from keyboard and mouse mode to touch mode, so the buttons get bigger, a little more space between things that you might have to click or tap so that you don't fat finger things accidentally, changing the views for you to make it easier to read on that device. And they're going to continue to extend this across to the smartphone devices, as well as Windows 10 is released on phones. So we're going to have a very consistent experience of being able to go from one working mode to another seamlessly and productively without having to do anything, because the device will just adapt, and Windows 10 will just adapt to what we do. So let's talk a little bit about Cortana. Cortana is one of my favorite features in Windows Phone. I've used it since it came out. I use it every day. I do things like reminders for myself. It's probably the most common thing I do. Remind me to pick up milk at the grocery store. Remind me to call a colleague about this. Remind me the next time I talk to Harry to ask about questions that we need to answer in the third webinar in the series. And then when my phone rings or Harry contacts me, it'll pop that reminder up for me. Cortana integrates now on Windows 10 with Office 365. Some important things, I know I'll talk about it in a minute, but there were some questions in previous webinars about privacy and security. So I thought I would point out a few things as we extend services like Cortana, which is a search-based tool and a machine learning-based tool onto Windows 10 and with Office 365. Obviously, it's going to be gathering information, and so privacy comes up. First thing is users have to turn it on. It's not on by default. So Cortana's on when you turn on your PC, but a lot of the features are turned off. So if you have Windows 10, you'll want to go into Cortana and turn those features on. And if you're concerned about privacy, read the information that comes up about privacy to make sure you know what you're doing. But users have to turn on integration between Windows 10 and Office 365. You have to set up the Outlook, Universal Mail, and Calendar apps that exist inside of Windows 10. So currently, it doesn't work with the Microsoft Outlook that you get through Office 365. It works with the built-in modern apps that ship with Windows 10. So Cortana integrates with those. It's easy to set up your Office 365 account in those apps. It doesn't preclude you from using Outlook. I use Outlook. I have it set up in those apps, and so then Cortana can reach into my email and my calendar to access things like meetings or travel plans and those sorts of things. It is for Windows 10 only. Obviously, Cortana doesn't exist on previous versions of Windows for the desktop, so you have to have Windows 10 to make this work. One example of what Cortana will do when you do this integration is meeting preparation. So let's say I have a meeting coming up. Cortana will look for details about that meeting, like it will surface information about the people who are in the meeting, documents that they recently worked on. It'll pop up reminders including travel time if the meeting is off-site. So Cortana will know that I have to travel to the meeting and remind me when I need to leave, including my preference if I've set it for transportation, if I'm walking, if I like to walk, if I like to take the bus, or if I like to drive. Here is an example. For those of you concerned about security, if you're an Office 365 admin, you can go in and turn access to Cortana for Office 365 off at the company level. So if your policy is that you don't want Cortana to be looking at Office 365 data, you as an admin can go in and shut that off for your entire organization regardless of what the users do. So one switch, very easy to do. Microsoft's concerned and focused on privacy and security, so they give you the tools to be able to manage that as you see fit.
Hey, Grant,
here's an example. Yep.
Grant, yeah, I just wanted to interject there. Well, you're still on Cortana, but let me share an insight here again, just used it yesterday. But folks, you may not know, if you hold down the Windows key and the Enter key simultaneously, you launch this reader capability. So you're in a Microsoft Word document, perhaps a proposal. You're alone, so you don't have someone who can sit there and read it back to you and help you find plural and singular construct errors and that all those little nits that we all have in writing. So Grant, what you can do, maybe you do this, but I love it for content, is go into Word, have your document open, be on the page, and do Windows key, Enter, and then it just starts reading the document back to you, and sure enough, you catch something every time. It's not Cortana, but it was let's just say it's a close cousin.
Yeah, that's a fantastic tool to be able to have the computer proofread it back to you so you can hear a mistake that you might have. This is an example, obviously, on a mobile device, so this is a Windows phone screenshot, but to give you an idea, this shows you what Cortana would show in the morning, show you weather, show you information about your calendar. This is Windows 10 on a Nokia phone, and then give you the ability to connect through Skype for Business, look at your calendar, so it shows you that you've got a meeting coming up and gives you the information about that. And then on the right here, I suppose I should get to my little pointer. On the right here, we have Cortana grabbing travel information. So it'll actually grab that out of your email if you use Expedia or Alaska Airlines or whatever. The flight information comes into your email. Cortana will pick that up. know what your flight is, tell you information about getting to the airport for that particular flight, tell you what the flight status. And so that's on the phone. Obviously, that works on Windows 10 as well. And then if I go back to this slide, so here's Windows 10 on a tablet, and this is an example of meeting content being surfaced. So there's a meeting coming up. This surfaces one of the people in the meeting, so it shows me who it is, what their title is. Through Office 365, if they've filled out this information, I can actually click on here and go and see more information about that person. I have a one-click link to their email. It shows me documents that they've got shared out there, as well as upcoming events that they have on their calendar that they've made public to the organization. So I can glean a lot of information very quickly, and I can drill into it. It's a little hard to see, but there's see all below the PowerPoint document that's here, so I could see all the documents that Garth has shared. And then on the right-hand side, get my laser pointer back here, on the right-hand side you can see Cortana's popped up that it's time to leave for the meeting, giving me a route to take across one of Seattle's floating bridges, and told me, you know, hey, you better leave now based on traffic and the time this meeting starts. If you don't leave now, then you're probably going to be late. So that helps to keep people on time. This is incredibly useful in production. It really is like having a personal assistant that is working for you, or a secretary that's working for you and keeping you on track. Let's talk a little bit about privacy. So should we be concerned? First and foremost, Microsoft doesn't spy. I don't work for Microsoft, although I've worked around Microsoft for a couple of decades. Microsoft has no interest in spying on its customers, its partners. It's not part of its business model. It doesn't generate revenue that way. You know, obviously Microsoft has to maintain compliance with laws. So, you know, they have to meet all the requirements that the government or sets forth, or if you're in another country, that the government of that country sets forth, and Microsoft complies with laws. But they're not in the spying business. You know, that's just the fact of it. They're in the software and services business. Snooping makes a good headline. So around Windows 10 launch, there were a lot of headlines out about Windows 10, you know, getting information about you and passing that on and what it searches, and you know, that's good news. It's a good news story. People will read those things and tend to buy into those things. But again, Microsoft is not in the spying or the snooping business. One of the examples of this, and please, I'll linger here on this slide for a minute. Microsoft has a website specific to Windows 10, but there are links on there to other privacy policies. They have clearly stated privacy policies. They revise those things from time to time where somebody may point out some ambiguity or a concern, to make sure that it is incredibly clear what Microsoft does with your information. And recently, because of the headlines around Windows 10, they have even added some language in there to tell you why they might access that information. For example, to deliver an email to you, they need to get to the email to see who the mail is to, who the mail is from, scan the content to block spam and those sorts of things. So that's happening, and they are very transparent about what is happening, and even more so now about why that's happening. And there are also tools, as I mentioned before when talking about Cortana, you can turn those features off. A lot of those features are not enabled by default. You have to go turn them on, sign in with your password, accept the terms and conditions of those things. So they're very much take the approach that they want to protect people's privacy, but they also want to enable functionality, and so then you as the user can, or as an organization, can pick and choose what of those services you want. So I highly recommend you go to this website if you're concerned about privacy at all. Read the terms and conditions. They provide clear instructions for all their settings about how to turn things off if you don't want to use them, how to protect yourself. And I highly recommend, if you're using other services out there, that you go and read those privacy policies too, because Microsoft has some of the best privacy policies in the industry out there, and there are a lot of companies that you know, I'm not going to call out names, but whose privacy policies explicitly grant them rights, for example, to use your content to do things. And so it's important for people, especially people who are really concerned about it, but for everybody to understand what happens to content when you give it to a service provider. And Microsoft works incredibly hard to be transparent in that fashion and give you instructions to protect yourself. So I thought I would show you a couple of things quickly, and then I have a few more slides to go through. So this is an example of Sway. So you can go to sway.com and use Sway. It works on multiple devices and multiple operating systems, but it works really well with Windows 10. Again, I didn't create this content. This, guys, clearly states as an example. It's up on sway.com, so you can get to it. But this is very easily created content, and essentially it gives you flow. I'm not going to use my touch screen for the presentation, but I could use my finger if I were on my touch screen to slide through this. So you can see there's text, there's photos, headlines. It smoothly scrolls. I don't know how well that comes across in the webinar, but it has nice transition in terms of your reading. So you're going through all these different things and looking at all these different images, reading content. There are links that are enabled in some of the content that would take me out to websites, so I can go through all of this and have all of this information available to other users. And one of the cool things about this is it works across devices. So I could create a PowerPoint, and then I could maybe share that deck. I could turn it into a PDF and email that deck out to people. With Sway, I can publish those things, make it available to people. You'll notice the little share icon up in the upper right-hand corner here. So I could share this out through social media, through email, and allow people to view the content that I've created. And it will automatically transform that content based on the platform that they're looking. So if they're on a mobile device like a phone with a very small screen, it will adapt the content to that screen for them. If they're on a laptop or a tablet touchscreen, it'll adapt to all of those different environments. So it makes it very easy to publish content. It doesn't have to be about climbing a mountain. It could be a business presentation, business plan, anything that was related to your particular organization, but very useful, very easy to use, and just takes PowerPoint to a different place. It's not a replacement for PowerPoint. That certainly has its place, but a great way to have and publish content. One of the other things that's available on Office 365 that I don't actually have something to show you is in a lot of the plans now you have the ability to publish video. So you can actually create your video and then save it to Office 365, and they will manage the content hosting of that and streaming that out over a nice solid connection so that other people can view your videos, training videos, or whatnot inside your organization and out. The other thing I wanted to show you, I turned my Cortana off, in my integration off for a little bit. So in Windows 10, when I click on Cortana, it's just going to bring up some popular stuff. So this is kind of news headlines and whatnot. If you want to enable integration with Office 365, you go into Settings here on the left, and then here I can turn on my reminders and alerts. Again, it's going to tell me all about what it's going to do, what information it's going to grab. Gives me a link clearly to the privacy statement so that there's no question about what Microsoft's doing with data or what data that they're going to collect. Ask me to agree, and then I can put in a name, or if you have a nickname, you can use that. Cortana will use that as well. And then it's going to immediately start looking for things that might be particular to me. And from there, I can go into the notebook, and I can choose connected accounts. And this is where I can turn on other accounts that I might want to connect up. So for example, if I want to connect up my Office 365 account to enable that functionality, assuming that my administrator has not turned this off, I can go in here and I can enter my Office 365 account. If anyone wants to know how to have their company logo show up there, you can email me later. And then I'm going to go ahead and sign in. So once I sign in here, now I've enabled Cortana to access my Office 365 data. And so all of those features that we talked about with Cortana and Office 365 will now light up for me inside of Windows 10. So very easy to do, but you have to go through those steps of acknowledging the agreement and accepting the privacy statement and whatnot. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about identity. So for those IT professionals on here, or if you are the de facto IT professional in your organization with Windows 10, we've got some new identity ability, and with Office 365. When you subscribe to Office 365, what many people don't know is behind the scenes, Microsoft gives you a basic Microsoft Azure, which is a cloud service platform in its own right. They give you an Active Directory instance for your organization. That's where the identity lives. When you saw me sign into Office 365, that's where my username and password live, is in Azure AD or Azure Active Directory. You can take control of that basic instance. You can upgrade it to a premium instance and get additional features available through Azure AD. With Windows 10, we now have the ability to join Azure AD as a device, which enables certain functionality. So this chart gives you some examples of two different devices. One is organization-owned devices. So if the organization buys the PC or the tablet or whatever it is, you can join your traditional Active Directory, which usually lives on-premise, so that would be in your corporate four walls. That establishes trust, and the user is going to sign in using their Active Directory account. This is the traditional way we've done things. You could also, or alternatively, have the computer join Azure Active Directory. So especially for the small business that may not have or may not need to have a domain controller, or really a couple of domain controllers on premise, they don't want to have those servers anymore, or they don't have them anymore, you can now join that computer to your Azure Active Directory to establish that trust. They're going to use their Azure AD or their Office 365 accounts, one and the same thing, to sign in and out, and that's going to enable them to access corporate services like Office 365. It may also enable things like Intune and other mobile device management, so that you as a corporation can apply policies to that device, restrictions, security policies, those types of things. And your settings will now roam, because your settings are stored in Azure Active Directory, and that's available anywhere you have internet connectivity. Your settings will roam between devices. The other advantage of Azure Active Directory is for personally owned devices. A lot of times people are bringing personally owned devices into the workplace or using them for work, and now with Azure Active Directory you can register those devices to your domain and take partial control of them, apply some basic corporate policies, protect corporate data, and things like that. You can do this with on-premise Active Directory, but it's more complicated to set up, and certainly out of the budget of most small businesses and even a lot of mid-sized businesses. With the on-premise Active Directory and Azure AD, there is the ability to synchronize your on-premise Active Directory with Office 365 Active Directory, and so you could still join devices to Azure AD if you wanted to have a mix of some devices joined to Azure AD and some joined on-premise. This is all brand new for Windows 10, and one of the things it does is it gives you single sign-on to multiple services. So we talked about single sign-on with Office 365. With Windows 10, you sign in, you're signed into your Office 365 accounts automatically once that's set up. With Azure Active Directory, you sign in, and now you also have access to other cloud services within your corporation. For example, if you use Salesforce.com or corporate Twitter, there's over, I think, 2,500, maybe even 3,000 at this point, applications that are software as a service applications, most of them, but not all web-based, that you can federate with so that your Azure Active Directory user will sign you into those services. Makes it incredibly easy for IT professionals to manage things like decommissioning an account. So a user gets terminated or leaves the company, you can turn their account off and they no longer have access not only to their computer, to the corporate network, to Office 365, but also to those extra services that might be out there that the organization is consuming. It shuts them down with one click, essentially, to all of those corporate services and all corporate data. And the benefit to the user is they have one sign-in and they're signed into all of those services as well. So when they're still with the organization, makes them much more productive, not a bunch of passwords to remember. Here's another slide that shows a bit more how it works. So Windows Server Active Directory, if that does exist on-premise, or other directories, there is some connectivity available for those. And then that can synchronize very simply to Azure Active Directory. You don't have to have the on-premise Active Directory. As I mentioned before, we can separate right here along this line in this first block and just start with Azure Active Directory, which is an excellent choice for small businesses. It's self-service. In other words, as long as you've set it up for a user to have the ability, they could go out and buy a tablet on their own, come back, join it to Azure Active Directory. Corporate policies will now apply to that device, and they can consume corporate services within it, and you can rest assured that it meets the requirements that your business or organization has set forth, and that applies to all devices. It doesn't matter if they're running Windows 10 or not, if they're a tablet or a mobile phone or a PC. And then single sign-on is enabled through that, and that single sign-on applies to not only Microsoft services like Azure, Office 365, and Intune, but also to those many thousands of software as a service applications that exist out there in the marketplace today. So huge win there, especially for IT folk and for end users in terms of increased productivity, better security, and fewer passwords to remember. So one of the questions we had earlier was about additions. So this is a slide from one of our previous sessions on upgrading to Windows 10. I thought I would throw this up here again. This shows you, if you're on Windows 7 on the left-hand side here, Windows 7, on the right-hand side, Windows 8, shows the edition that you're on, and then to the right of it shows where you'll go if you upgrade from that to Windows 10. So Starter, Home Basic, and Home Premium on Windows 7, go to Windows 10 Home. Professional and Ultimate, go to Windows 10 Pro. For Windows 8, if you're on Windows 8.1, you go to Home. If you're on Pro or Pro for Students, you go to Pro. And then for those folks who are on Enterprise, it's down here below. Obviously, you're going to be going Enterprise to Enterprise. So your edition is not going to change from Windows 7 or Windows 8.1 to Windows 10. So some of the differences between them, consumer versus enterprise. Again, here are the additions in Windows 10: Home, Pro, Enterprise, and Education. Enterprise and Education are essentially the same thing. They're just one's geared towards educators, and the other one's geared towards for-profit businesses and some larger nonprofits. Home is geared towards the consumer, and Pro kind of to the small business sector world, but there are even a lot of enterprises that use Pro if they don't need the features. So we'll go through these fairly quickly. I'm not going to belabor all the features of Windows 10 because we went through those in a previous webinar, but in all editions you get the core experience: customizable start menu, Windows Defender, Hyperboot, TPM if you have hardware support, Battery Saver, which is a feature that came over from the mobile platforms to help save battery on tablets and laptops. Cortana, I noted here, Cortana is not available in all markets around the world, so obviously available in the U.S., but if you're in an outlying market, Cortana may not be available yet. Windows Hello, that's the single sign-on with fingerprint or retinal scan. Multi-doing, we talked about this in a past thing, that's virtual desktop, Snap Assist. Continuum, I mentioned earlier, that's switching between tablet and PC mode. Again, all of these available in all the different editions of Windows 10, as well as Microsoft Edge and Windows Update. These are business experiences that are not included in Home. So if you have the Home Edition, you do not get Domain Join, Azure AD Join, what we just talked about, Group Policy, Remote Desktop, Hyper-V on your client machine, which is virtualization technology. You cannot upgrade from Home to Enterprise. You can upgrade from Pro to Enterprise. The Windows Store for Business and Dynamic Provisioning. If you're interested in dynamic provisioning, see the last webinar we did last week. BitLocker, which is disk drive encryption, so if you lose your device and somebody doesn't have your password and tries to take your hard drive out and put it in another machine to gain access to it, they need the key to unlock BitLocker to be able to do that. And Trusted Boot, which is a security feature that I think people ought to be interested in, and so I would strongly encourage people to go for the Pro version simply because of this, because it will thwart some significantly damaging anti-malware, things that modify your boot system and really dig themselves into the operating system at a very low level and are very difficult to remove. As well as Windows Update for Business. So again, this list here is not in Windows Home, but does exist in Pro, Enterprise, and Education. This is what Pro leaves out. And by no means are these entirely comprehensive. They are pretty comprehensive, but I obviously couldn't cover every last little nuance, but these are the important things to note. So not in Home, not in Pro, direct access, that is remote access to corporate resources that live inside the corporate network from outside the corporate network. So if I'm traveling, I could gain access to a file share that's inside a building at my corporation without a VPN, but do that securely. Windows to Go Creator, Windows to Go being the ability to run Windows from a certified USB stick. If I wanted to take my computer without taking my computer, I could load Windows to Go onto a USB stick and then plug it into another computer and access my Windows, modify some files and things like that, and then shut it down, and I'd take that USB stick with me back to the office and sync it back up. The ability to create that is only in Enterprise and Education. App Locker, which is the ability to prevent users from running certain applications. Start screen control via group policy, and also a couple more security features, credential and device guard. If you want to learn more about those, again, see our last couple of sessions because we go into more detail about those. There are a few other questions, and then we can take some live questions. There are a few other questions lingering from some past webinars. One of the questions that came up was what the current state of OneDrive storage with Windows 10 and Office 365. The Office 365 plans include OneDrive for Business, which is different than OneDrive, and they give you 1 terabyte of space per user. So if you buy the Home, I think it's Home Premium SKU, you get 5 users for your home, and you get 1 terabyte of storage, personal storage for each of those users. And if you're in business, you get 1 terabyte of storage for each of your individual users, and that's essentially their My Documents folder in the cloud, so they can store their own documents that are specific to them that don't belong in corporate file shares there, and they can share them out of there as well. Very important to distinguish OneDrive for Business, which is part of Office 365, and OneDrive, which is the free service that Microsoft has for consumers. OneDrive comes with 15 gigabytes, not terabytes, of storage. You can buy more storage for that, and that would be for people who don't have an Office 365 subscription. Another related question, can you have both a personal and business OneDrive? The answer is yes, you can. However, it's important to understand the storage limitations of those two and why you would want to store things in one versus the other. So if you have personal photos and things, you'd store those in your personal OneDrive. If you have business, and then your business documents would be stored in your corporate OneDrive for Business. That way you keep those things separate, and should you leave the company, your personal content remains yours personally. And both of those can synchronize with Windows, so you can have access to both of those on the same device. Another question was about Windows Media Center, which was removed from Windows 10. Does Microsoft plan to make it available in any way, or is there a workaround to regain that functionality? All the research that I did, the answer is it's been removed from Windows 10. The project has been end of life, so there is no more Windows Media Center. Microsoft recommends that you look at the applications that are out there in the Windows Store if you just want simple functionality like Netflix and Amazon Instant Video and those things. There are also some products out there, XBMC, Plex, Media Portal, to name a few, that provide very similar functionality to what Media Center was doing, and have versions, or will have versions, available for Windows 10 to add things like DVR and those types of things if you're a media buff. But no plans, as far as I know, for Microsoft to resurrect Windows Media Center or make it available ever in Windows 10 and beyond. Is the Windows 10 certification exam available yet? I actually couldn't find a definitive answer on this. I know there is training out there for it. I believe it's going to be on the configuring devices along the 70-697 line, but I couldn't get an official answer prior to this webinar on whether that exam has been published yet for those of you who are trying to take the MCP. And one other question, and then we can dive into live questions from this one, and that is, through virtualization, can I control two simultaneous outgoing audio streams using two disparate audio jacks and cards? And the answer to that is Hyper-V does not include any virtualization for audio. So there's no virtual audio device included in Hyper-V, either on the client or on a server. About the only way you can get audio that way is through the remote desktop protocol, remote desktop services, and then you might be able to do something along those lines, but likely it's not going to do whatever whoever was asking this question was looking for in terms of being able to stream audio through two different devices. I'm not sure what their end game there was, but essentially the answer is no, because there's no audio device included in virtualization under Hyper-V.
Okay, Grant, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for the person who had the snooping question, there's a lively conversation over on Vladville. So a lot of people know Vlad. Go to Vladville and join in the privacy conversation. Grant, one important question, folks. We are at time, so we'll go just as quick as we can. And so quickly, please quickly touch on the controversial P2P updates. Important to know this is on by default. I'm assuming that's peer-to-peer. That's what it was in my day, P2P.
You're cutting out just a tiny bit there, Harry.
Let's see, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I got rid of my headset. So peer-to-peer updates, P2P updates turned on by default. I'm assuming P2P still means peer-to-peer. If you could answer that question. What do we know about P2P?
In terms of peer-to-peer networking, we still have Windows Home Group available to us, so you can still set up that peer-to-peer type network, share printers and files and whatnot between those. And it also includes support for Mac. So in my household, we have one Mac and a bunch of Windows PCs, and so we can still share files across all those things.
Okay, and Grant, I can knock out a couple of questions here real quickly. Windows Phone is dropping rapidly, referring to its popularity. Does any of this work on iPhone and Android? Grant, you actually answered that in terms of the Office 365 functionality on other platforms. So there's the snooping question again.
I want to add one thing there.
Yeah.
So on the Windows Phone issue, I'm a huge fan of Windows Phone just because I like the device. I've used iPhones, I've used Androids as my personal device, and I like the Windows Phone hands down. There are a lot of people who feel that way, but because of market share are concerned about the platform, understandably. About a week ago, maybe not even that, might have been earlier this week, there was a pre-release announcement for the iOS Bridge, which is new technology that Microsoft has developed that enables, and again, this is pre-release, but it's public knowledge, that enables iOS developers to take their Objective-C code that they've written their iOS applications in and very easily port it to the Windows 10 platform. And I say Windows 10 because Microsoft is working on the idea of the universal application, which means you write it for Windows 10 and it will run on Xbox, it will run on Windows 10 PC, tablet, phone, so you don't have to write for those different platforms anymore. You're able to write once and have it work on all those different devices and form factors. And I think this is going to be a huge step in the right direction for Windows Phone, not only the Windows 10 release, but also the ability for iOS developers to easily move their applications or create Windows versions of their applications. And if Windows truly has the universal application thing down, which is from what I've seen so far they do, that means that as a developer, not only am I porting my application from iOS to Windows Phone, which doesn't have huge market share, but now my application would be available in the Windows Store to all Windows PC users, Windows tablet users, as well as Xbox users. And so it opens up a huge marketplace for iOS developers to take their existing applications with very little effort and release them to a whole new host of users. And so I think we're going to see a lot of iOS apps porting to the Windows platform, not because they're going for Windows Phone, but because they're going for the massive install base that Windows has around the world. And if we see that, then I think you're going to see a significant uptick in the Windows Phone market share, because quite honestly, almost everyone I've asked who uses an iPhone or an Android, if you let them play with a Windows Phone, they like the user interface and the experience much better. But because it's missing a lot of the apps that they like to use, they're reluctant to switch. And because there isn't as much market share, they're reluctant to switch. So I think Microsoft has the ability to reverse those trends, and they're certainly putting a significant amount of effort into it.
Okay, I'll answer the next one. How do I turn off the reader? Sir, turn off the reader with Windows Enter again. There's a question about different telecoms. I'm going to pass on sort of the Verizon question. Let's keep going up, Grant. And folks, we are at overtime right now. I totally appreciate those that are able to stay. We'll go a couple more minutes. So Outlook Universal Access is the built-in email program. So is that mail in Win 10? Is Outlook Universal Access, Grant?
Yes, yeah, so it's the Mail app that comes with Windows 10.
Yeah, okay. Do you think Cortana will eventually work with Outlook? And that's from someone named Thanks. So if you can answer the question. There
are plans for Cortana to integrate with Outlook 2016, and that is planned It's in the works already. No official release date on it, but it's coming soon.
Okay, boy, this is a long one, so let's give it a shot. We have previously installed O365 on the terminal server within Azure. Okay, when will we be able to run the O365 application in the terminal server? I mean, Office 2016 apps in terminal server. That's the core question. So Office 16 inside terminal server.
I don't have an official answer for that. I know Office 2013, as long as you use the Office deployment tool to install Office 365 on there so that you can set the shared computer switch on the install so that as users log in, they're using their own Office 365 login. If you don't set that switch, I know you run into a lot of problems because it's going to look for a single login, and it makes a mess of things on our terminal server. So again, if you're going to install Office 365 apps on a terminal server or on a shared PC, that is possible. I don't know for sure about Office 2016, but I don't see why not. But you need to use the Office deployment tool to do that install, not from the Office 365 portal.
Okay, that makes sense. Someone correcting me, in Excel, the limit is 2 million rows unless you download the add-in for Power Pivot. Still gonna, darn it, still gonna not meet my needs of 3.5 million rows. Grant, let me scroll to the bottom. We'll take one more, and then Grant, I'll get you the other questions if you think you have a spare second to reply or want to turn it into a blog. That'd be great. We could kick it out as an article. Let's see. The Windows exams are almost ready, not released yet. 20,000. We'll do a couple. 20,000 file folder limit has been removed from OneDrive for Business. That's a question. Do you know if that limit's been removed for OneDrive for Business?
I don't think that limit has been lifted yet, but if it is in the works, so if it's not gone now, it will be soon.
Okay. Grant, you are truly a star. Lots of relevant info, presented concisely and at a good pace. All 3 sessions have been great. Thanks. That's David Anderson, who used to live up here on Mercer Island and be in Steve Banks' user group. He now lives in San Diego. Thank you, David. Next, can you explain how to make a Windows 10? Can you explain how to make a Windows 10 if you have no on-prem AD connect via Azure AD? So it's an AD question concerning Windows 10. What's involved with doing that? What steps do you take?
So in Windows 10, you can, when you go to the screen where you do a domain join, in the interest of time, I'm not going to pull it up here, but essentially when you go to the domain join screen, now there's an additional option for join Azure AD. To be clear, you can't join both. You have to pick. Are you going to join Azure AD or are you going to join on-prem AD? That's an organizational decision to be made. If you have on-prem and you're synchronizing, for example, to Azure AD, it may make sense to have some join Azure AD and some on-premise. Maybe all your desktops that are stationary are on-prem, and anything that's mobile is in Azure AD. But that's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. And no problems with that. It works great. It's easy. Takes a second.
Cool. Getting a bunch of access and SQL advice. Thank you, folks. I'll definitely read that. Not my problem. Well, you can count on this audience, let me tell you. What are the caveats of transitioning from 365 business plans to enterprise plans? Grant, I found it to be, spank me if I'm wrong, I thought it was more of a licensing issue, the type of license you buy. I'm sure there's some technical considerations going from business to say E3. Maybe you know those.
So I know a lot's changed in that area, but I believe when you are on the business plans, you have a 300 user limit, and if you need to break out of that or need to avail yourself of the enterprise features, that there is some migration involved there. That The kind of the slang term for that is an O to O, an Office 365 to Office 365 migration. There are tools out there that will can help you do that, but I don't believe that you can yet flip a switch between SKUs. You can mix and match SKUs within an organization. So if you need some of a particular plan and some of another, you can do that.
Yep.
But I don't think you can do a full conversion between the business plans and the enterprise plans at this point. But I could be wrong. I know they've been working a lot on that.
Okay, yeah, because I do some E3s and E1s. We're going to make this the final question, folks. There were a couple of others. We'll figure out how to socialize those answers. So, is Photo Gallery no longer available in Win 10? The question of the day, Photo Gallery.
Photo Gallery. That's interesting. I don't know the answer to that one. I don't know that I can recall what Photo Gallery is in previous versions or whether it's in there now. I store all my photos, personal photos, on OneDrive, and it has a great photo display both on the web and on the PC, and that's how I flip through them on my, and I have it on my Xbox at home. We have an Xbox One, so if we want to go look at pictures of the pumpkin patch from the day, I can go onto Xbox and flip through them using Connect or on my phone or on my tablet. But I keep it all in OneDrive, and that's all I use for photos. So, don't know.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, folks, we're going to bring it to an end. We did go over time a few minutes today. Thank you very much. Have a great Thanksgiving for those of you in the U.S. Grant, that includes you, sir. Thank you for participating in this three-part series, and we will see you guys next webinar, so enjoy the holiday. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.